Welcome to the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's not just for contracting officers. If you work anywhere in the government acquisition world, this podcast is for you. We know the name, the Contracting Officer Podcast, has caused a lot of confusion over the years. Because while Kevin and I were both contracting officers, and many of our listeners are contracting officers, the topics we cover are meant for everyone in the government acquisition world. We have some exciting news coming up. We are going to be changing the name in the near future to better reflect the purpose of the podcast. That's enough about the future. Let's talk about today's episode. Our topic today is price to win, and we have special guest Michael McNulty from McNulty & Associates here to walk us through it. I'll let him explain what McNulty & Associates is all about.
Well, McNulty & Associates is a consulting firm that provides mostly competitive assessment and price to win. We've built a team of price to win leads and competitive assessment folks, wrap rate analysts, labor analysts, and strategists that help us do over 80 price to win engagements a year for our customers. And our goal, of course, is to help them win.
As you'll hear in this episode, price to win is valuable across every type of government business. Here's Michael again.
We work a lot in IT. That's very big, of course, because software and IT is part of practically everything these days. We work a lot in mission systems. These are systems that touch the warfighter. We do a lot in base operations and logistics, and we do a lot of professional and engineering services.
Okay, that's enough to whet your appetite. Let's get started with today's episode. What is price to win? Price to win sounds pretty obvious. Who's really going to price a proposal to lose? But what is price to win? Is it a process? Is it a philosophy? Is it just one step in the proposal process? Is it the most critical step? What is price to win?
That's an interesting question. And I think one of the ways to take a look at it is, what are we trying to do? What is the problem that we're trying to solve with price to win? Price to win comes from the obvious desire to understand what your competition or your competitor is doing on the same program you're bidding. What are they going to do from a price standpoint, and how are they going to score on non-priced items like technical, past performance, risk, transition, and so on? So the whole idea is, can we come up with a methodology to forecast and estimate what your competition is going to do? And if we have that right, and they do that, then from that we can say, okay, what should we bid? What should our price be to win, given those circumstances? That's the whole thing.
And you have a process that gives you all of the data that you need in order to forecast what that price to win should be.
We do. The process is designed to come at the problem that I just described a couple different ways. One of the things that is going to be very important when you're looking at a price to win is to understand the government's point of view. And they do have a point of view. They have a budget. They have what they think things should cost. And analyzing that is usually referred to as a top-down price to win, where we take a look at, for an upcoming program, what the historical spending has been or what the budget is, so you can get your head around what the government customer thinks this program is worth. That's a good thing to know. That's the first step for sure.
It sure is.
But then, on top of that, you really want to look at the competitive assessment. The competitive assessment helps inform everyone that's doing the price to win of how the competitors will probably tackle the program. How important is it to them? Is it a big recompete for them? Is it a must-win new business break-in opportunity for them? How are they coming at the program? And then what are they bringing to the program? Some company might be really interested in the program, but if not bringing a lot to the table, they're not going to score that well on non-priced items. They've got to have the technical capabilities. They have to have the past performance, and they've got to write a good proposal. And if they can't do that, they're not going to score that well on the non-priced items. But if they have those things, if they are a strong incumbent, if they are technically strong, if they have past performance, and they write a good proposal, they're going to be very strong. And that's something we need to be able to reveal to our customers when we're doing price to win analysis.
So you take all that data and you lump it together with all the other things you've analyzed about that competitor, whether they recently lost 3 bids in a row, so they're going to be hungrier.
Sure. All of that. And then, of course, once we've done the traditional top-down analysis that I described and the competitive analysis that I talked about, then the real heavy lift of a bottoms-up analysis is done. And that's where we really get down into all the requirements of the RFP, estimating all of the workload elements associated with completing all of the requirements and meeting all the requirements of the RFP in the competitor's coordinate system, not our client's system, not our client's world, the competitor's world, and estimating the workload that they'll have to likely exert to do the work, to meet all the requirements of the work. And that gives us labor, hardware and software, materials, all that kind of stuff that they're going to have to bring to the table to be compliant and meet the requirements of the RFP. And then, of course, that gets looked at very hard from a gaming standpoint to see what knobs they would turn to try to make themselves as attractive as possible. When you pull those three things together, the top-down analysis, the competitive analysis, and the bottoms-up analysis, now you get a pretty good picture of where the competitor will probably end up.
So this isn't just pricing people, despite the fact that it's called price to win. Your team isn't just pricing people, crunching numbers at the top level price.
That's right. In fact, a lot of people call it position to win. They don't even call it price to win. They call it position to win because it takes into account positioning, given the gaming maneuvers and all the other activities that the competitor might take on and what the customer, the government, thinks the should cost is, and really positioning your company, given what you bring to the table, your capabilities, how important it is to your management team, all the stakeholders in your company, and positioning yourself with the client to win the program.
What kind of skill set, what background do your team members have to be able to do this kind of analysis?
It's a varied background. Obviously, the people that are involved in price to win, a lot about competitions, and a lot about competing in the government space. Most of us have 20 plus years of experience bidding programs, working on the capture side of companies, mostly larger firms. And on top of that, most of my senior people have many years of experience in the craft of price to win. So doing the things that I've been describing thus far. Technical backgrounds are important, especially for a lot of the work we do. We do a lot of work that requires solutioning or some sort of a solution to meet the RFP requirements. Let's say it's the design of an upgrade to a major radar, or doing some sort of major software upgrade or new software, what have you. In order to do that, we need technical folks, and they need to be very strong. Most of our senior leads have multiple engineering degrees and have lots of experience working in real programs, real systems, working at major firms where they had to design, build, install, deploy systems that had to work, had to meet the government requirements. So there's a lot of expertise in the senior team at McNulty on that side as well. So there's a big background in different things: engineering, accounting, finance, contracts, pricing, a whole bunch of disciplines.
So we've talked about how you do a competitive assessment, top-down and bottoms-up analysis. So through that process, you're building up the price. Where do you get the data that provides the inputs to their basic costs?
Right. So that's a great question. The all labor that's been on the government contracts, it really consists of a few components. Direct labor, which is what the employee gets paid. The wrap rate, which is the indirect expenses the company incurs while doing business, things like fringe benefits they pay and overhead expenses in G&A. So that wrap rate, and then the fee that they're going to bid. So you put the direct labor and wrap rate and fee together, and you start to get, that's price labor. But where do we get all that? That's the question, right?
Right.
Yeah. So direct labor, most companies use tools that come from the HR discipline. The folks in the human resource department know what everybody gets paid. And there are tools for that. And so we have subscriptions to those tools.
Okay.
And those tools work great because they give you information about the type of labor, let's say systems engineers in Norfolk, Virginia, down to the zip code. Those subscription tools will give you the labor categories and labor rates that are paid in that particular that market in America by companies that are, say, over 1,000 people and that sort of thing. So that doesn't give you the direct labor rate for a particular company, But those companies are competing in that area for those particular categories. And of course, the marketplace rules. So you get a pretty good snapshot of direct labor that way. Wrap rates are the next thing. We develop our own wrap rate analyses ourselves. We have very sophisticated tools that take publicly available data that we can find about the indirect expenses that I mentioned, fringe benefits, overhead, G&A expenses, and allocates those back so that it's a multiplier, if you will. It gets put on the labor to recoup those costs. Yeah. And then fee, if you think about fee, you look at a company's operating margin, look at their financials. They're really trying to protect their operating margin. And it's really the last lever that get pulled in gaming. They're going to protect that fee. So you put those three things together and you start to get a pretty good snapshot of labor categories, labor rates by company.
So we talked about competitive assessments, top-down analysis, bottoms-up analysis, and wrap rate analysis. You also mentioned gaming. Walk me through a gaming scenario.
So gaming is those are the maneuvers that companies undertake to lower their price, traditionally lower their price to win. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say a program is running along at $20 million a year, and the incumbent has the contract today, and they're getting paid $20 million a year. And it's a services contract at Hanscom Air Force Base. It's a pretty straightforward contract. It's doing important work. Let's say it's a program office for Joint Stars. And now the government puts it out for recompete because it's been 4 years and it's time. Okay. Everybody takes a run at that. If everybody bids $20 million again, they'll probably lose. I mean, it's right. It's going to be competed. It's competitive, and everybody's going to have to deal with the fact that everybody knows it was $20 million a year last year. And if you did that, right, that's not going to work. So you've got to use some gaming maneuvers. When you first do your labor buildup, you'll probably naturally come up to pretty close to $20 million because you know the head count and you know what they get paid, and you kind of do the math, and that's your baseline model. But that won't win. Then you have to take into account the fact that the incumbent knows that. The incumbent's going to drop their price some, how much, we could talk about, to make sure that nobody gets under them. Because the real way to beat an incumbent is to get under them on price. It's harder to beat them on their non-price scores, like technical, they'll probably do well, past performance, and so on. So the typical approach is to get under them on price. They know that, so they're going to drop their price usually to try to block that. Everybody else knows they're going to do that, and so they have to drop even lower. So gaming maneuvers start getting employed, like if you could bid less labor, that's the biggest one.
Right.
Or let's say you drop your DL rate, that's another big one. Or maybe you don't put as much fee on, which is kind of the last one. There's other things you can do. You can use a more juniorized workforce. You can employ things like Service Contract Act wage determination rates, which are potentially lower, have a lower fringe element. So there's lots of little adjustments that companies can do, which are perfectly legal under the FAR, that help drop the price, all in a maneuver to get under the incumbent, or if it's a new opportunity to be the most attractive bidder given their other offerings in the technical and past performance and that sort of thing.
As long as they can explain how those maneuvers are achievable without adding too much risk to performance.
That's right. They have to show the government exactly what they're doing and how they're going to do it. And that's a great point. Risk is probably my favorite word. And it goes to risk because the government from a buyer standpoint is constantly thinking about risk. What is the risk that this program is going to fail? What is the risk that this program is going to cost more than the government has budgeted for the program, and so on? And so they have a very keen eye for bids, which are risky. So just lowering the price on a job and bidding that, it may end up that's not going to go well. There's not enough people to do the job, not enough qualified people to do the job. Maybe they're not at the right place, or so on and so forth. And the government potentially gets a good deal up front, but it blows up later because it hasn't been de-risked.
Right.
And so the government's very wary about that.
Price to win sounds like a pretty important process if you actually want to win. So who should use price to win? Small companies, big companies, maybe everyone should use it?
Yeah, we think everyone should use it on some level. I mean, let's think about it. You're bidding a job. It could be a very important job for your company. It could be the main program that pays the bills at your company, and you need to defend it. So what do you do about that? not look at your competition? Let's think about that for a second. Why would you do that? Right? Let's throw our hands up. You can't, that doesn't make any sense. No professional business development or capture people are going to do that. There's some form of price to win or competitive analysis or, analysis overall that is going to go to trying to figure out what the other guys are going to do so you don't get blindsided and lose. There's various forms of price to win. From the simplest form that I've talked about over the years is if you know what it's going to take for your company to do the job and you simply knew the other guy's wrap rates and you went into your model and switched out the wrap rates in your model, you have a pretty good idea without any of the gaming maneuvers where the other guys would come in.
Yeah, as long as they don't get fancy with it, you can do the math pretty easily, right?
Right. Now, it's not a panacea, and it may not get you all that you want to have in a price to win, because the more complex the deal, the more levers that can be pulled, the more risk that can be put into the program based on, you might have to write several million lines of code, and software is its own animal. And how that gets estimated is not just taking wrap rates and changing them out. So there's a more sophisticated undertaking that needs to go on to really try to forecast that kind of situation. But I feel like everyone should do some form of it. A lot of times when we get called in, frankly, it's when somebody didn't do price to win and they've lost. And, right. And sometimes the new management is saying, we were sort of astonished that there wasn't any price to win activity going on here. Yeah, it's important.
It doesn't sound like there's one way to do it. It's a scalable exercise based on the complexity of and size of the bid at hand. What I was thinking is, for small companies to go through all of the pieces of it that we talked about earlier, that sounds very time consuming and, more importantly, very expensive for small companies to bear.
Well, it doesn't have to be. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think it's fair to say that a small company generally would be working on less risky programs than a really big
That's
company,
fair.
like some of the big names,
Yeah.
Right? And so those jobs often are pretty much labor-based. And to do price to win analysis on mostly labor jobs is pretty straightforward if it's done well by a strong practitioner. That doesn't have to be tremendously expensive. Finding those labor categories, finding the direct labor rates, like I talked about from the human resource data, and employing wrap rates and building up a baseline model is pretty straightforward. It can be done pretty quickly. The art of it, of course, is how well you know how to do that and tuning the model. Yeah, and tuning the model. That's where it takes expertise. Often when we have a junior analyst, they'll pull together the model and say, "That's good. You did a good job. That's right. All the numbers are right. It's just not a winning bid yet." Because they don't know what to do with it. They can do all the math, and they 100 people, these labor categories, these skill levels, these security clearances, and these IT certifications, and I multiplied all that times the number of hours and the rates, and a base year and 3 option years, and I add it all up, and there you go. And that's right. That's not wrong. That's how you start. But then, of course, you have to get into the business of who's bidding, how important is it to them, and all the gaming activities that we talked about before. And that's where the skill level and experience comes in to get your forecast of your competitors to something that really ends up being very accurate, very close to what they actually bid.
I'd like to insert at this point, many large companies have their own price to win departments. This is something, it's not something that the pricers do, that the pricing department does. And that you just mentioned that a junior analyst can build the model, but that's not a winning bid. If it was just a matter of building the model, well, a pricer that's good with math and with the tools would do that and you'd be done. Price to win requires quite a bit more. So large companies can afford to have a price to win department that is inserted into each bid or each large bid when they need to be in order to increase their probability of win. Smaller companies and mid-tiers may not be able to afford their own department, but they could look to a company like yours for the assistance. I'm sure you help large companies as well.
Yeah, that's right. And exactly what you said. The larger companies have their own in-house price to win capability. Even still, they keep them away from the pricing department normally. They're normally, right? And for good reason. You want that natural tension.
Yeah.
Look, everyone who works at their company works in an echo chamber. When you're at Lockheed, you're proud of Lockheed. It's a good company. You're proud to work there. You do great work, and you don't walk around talking about how great Raytheon is. And when you're over at Raytheon, you don't walk around talking about how great Lockheed is. So you've got a natural blind spot when you're competing, and they want a price to win outfit that's part of the company. Let's say the price to win cell at at one of the big outfits. They should be down the hall.
Right.
They should be looking at the competition, focusing on the competition, and not being tainted by what the pricing guys think the price should be. And neither should the pricing guys and gals be tainted by what the price to win folks should think. That's information that senior leadership and other senior stakeholders get to look at and make decisions about. All these companies often go outside as well. They know that there's a lot of value in having an outside independent assessment of their competition. So best in practice price to win activities are price to win folks are down the hall from price internally, and outside price to win folks really aren't talking to pricing people at all. They're talking to the capture people and senior stakeholders and giving them an assessment of their competitors' likely non-price and priced scores. And then they roll that into their strategy.
That makes sense. There's a lot of steps you've walked through in price to win. It sounds like it could take quite a bit of time on a large, complex acquisition to really get through the whole process. When should the price to win process begin?
Obviously, the sooner the better on all capture activities. If you're trying to win a big job and you haven't been looking at it for a long time, you haven't been chasing it for a long time, you haven't been shaping that deal, guess who has been shaping that deal? Your competition.
Exactly.
So when the RFP comes out, you're getting ready to bid an RFP that your competitor shaped. That's probably bad.
Yeah, probably.
That said, there's only so much you can do on a price to win early. Certain things can be done early. Competitive assessment work can be done pretty early. And then the top-down work, the budget analysis and top-down historical spending and should cost work can be done pretty early. The bottoms-up work can't be done really until the requirements of the RFP are sufficiently mature so you can estimate the work. So it might be an RFI or a statement of objectives that says, we want to support this program at Pax River. Okay, but you don't know what to do with that, right? It's just not defined enough.
Right.
So the sweet spot for us is between the RFI and the first real draft RFP, that's got some real meat on it. Because then we start to know things like, here's the scope of work, here's what the South says, here's what the customer is saying their requirements are likely going to be. Maybe they've had an industry day and they're talking about what their real requirements are. And you're starting to get a real shape of the program. That's a good time to bring in price to win folks. Good time to have them looking at top down, historical spending, budgets. Budgets take years and years to put together. So when you're looking at the 19 budget, you can see out a couple of years. That didn't happen a month ago. That happened a couple of years ago. So that the government pretty well knows what budgets are, certainly for defined programs, earlier than you might think. You want to get in there and start working as the draft RFP matures. The competitive assessment work is ongoing because companies drop out, they team, they buy each other, and so on. So you got to keep your eye on that throughout the process. The budgeting should cost information, like I said, is done pretty early and usually doesn't change very much. The bottoms up work, the first cut of the bottoms up work gets done when the draft RFP is sufficiently mature to estimate workload and take that to a price analysis of your competition. And of course, that's an ongoing activity that's going to go through the maturation of the draft RFP to the final RFP, with all Q&A and amendments all the way to proposal submission. So that's an updating process that's going to go on with the bottoms up.
Yeah, it speaks again to the importance of the government releasing a draft RFP as early as possible. Even if it's not perfect, even if some things are going to change, the earlier that they get out some information about what they're thinking, what the requirements are going to be, and how it's going to have to be accomplished, the better bids they're going to receive in the end.
Absolutely. I think when the government doesn't do that, it's a mistake. They want the best bids they can get. That makes sense, right? I mean, they want the best, most competitive bids that they can get for what they're trying to accomplish. So it makes sense that if you give the companies more time to work on that, you're going to get a better set of proposals, and it doesn't cost the government one more dime. It costs the companies money, but it doesn't cost the government any money.
Right.
Why don't you use the time you have as you get ready to release the final RFP to cause the companies to work like crazy to get a good proposal together?
Get the best solution that you can get at the most competitive price that still allows the companies to execute successfully.
Absolutely.
Can't do that if they're reading the RFP for the first time and have 30 days to respond.
And of course, like any place, there's the A team that you want on your most pressing problems. And if the government releases a draft RFP or at least releases an RFP right at very close between draft and final, or no draft at all, the A team might not be available. And so you're really putting a company at a disadvantage. They have the capabilities. A proposal is very hard to craft, and you need to make sure you have your best people on it. But if they're busy doing something else because they don't know when this RFP is coming out, right? It's really hard to get them clear and put them on the company's most pressing problem. So again, the government really does themselves a disservice by not giving the company as much heads up as possible so they can do their best work.
Yeah, that's a constant theme on the podcast is the open communication. The more you share, even if it's not perfect, I know a lot of us, myself included, like to wait till something's perfect or as close to perfect as possible before they let it out into the wild. But the earlier you share what you're thinking, the earlier you get questions that might help you shape your solution.
Yeah,
everybody benefits. So that's a good conversation on why the government should share information earlier to get better pricing through the price to win process, get better solutions, get better total proposals through the price to win process. Let's talk about the industry side. Who are the different people? What are the different roles on an industry team that would be interested in price to win in the analysis?
Well, if you think about a company at the top level, the senior stakeholders are committed to winning. They're committed to growing their companies. So they definitely have a vested interest in making sure they know as much about the competition as they can. And a lot of the times that we're talking to very, very senior stakeholders in companies because none of them have signed up for a negative compound annual growth rate.
Exactly.
Right?
They're not going to be there next year if that's what they achieve.
Yeah, you either get the job done or they'll find somebody else. Then there's all kinds of people internally that are stakeholders, all the senior line vice presidents, all the capture managers, all the pricing people. Pricing people will ultimately get benefit from the price to win analysis because the senior capture people ultimately say, okay, we've looked at everything and we need to be right here. Here's where we need to be. Pricing people, you need to get me here. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is where we're going to go. And of course, the program manager and the execution people, they're terrifically interested in this program. This is their next program. This is the program that they're going to, should they win, they're going to execute. So they're very interested in making sure that this is an executable program. They understand it. They can perform well on the program, do a good job for the government, make your profit goals, all the financial things that have to happen because they don't want to get a program in-house that's got all red flags all over it and it's losing money right? That's a disaster. That's another downstream problem. There's a whole bunch of people. I just rattled off a whole bunch of people that care, and they care greatly, so much so that I'll tell you, there's sleepless nights for all of them if it's not done right.
I can attest to that. There's a lot of tension between the pricers, the price to win team, the top leadership, and the line folks, the people that have to execute the work. I can remember sitting back and having a price built with my pricing team that I was confident that I could execute at, and just knowing that price to win was going to come in and the senior executives were going to look at it and they're going to say, all right, there's the price to win. I need you to get 2% below that. And then I'm sweating out, how would I ever execute if that was the case?
You're completely right. I mean, we've all been there. That's the world I come from. And so I get it. I know that. But best-in-class proper price to win takes all of that into account. And it should never give a program estimate and price to win estimate to a customer that is not executable. It is incumbent on the price to win company to show you how they got there, to show you how that's executable and compliant to the requirements of the RFP. It might be hard, it might be painful, but it has to be executable. If they can't show you that, then it's, I'd be very suspicious about that price to win.
Yeah,
right?
That's beautiful. I know that some leadership looks at price to win as a point solution, but if you don't understand all of the details that went into that price to win, you're not doing it right.
Well, the mechanics of the deal are tremendously important. I didn't mention this before, but I'd like to touch on it briefly. The mechanics of the deal are tremendously important for senior leaders and senior stakeholders to understand. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say it's a services contract that's running about $100 million a year. And let's say it comes out and you can see the final RFP, and 60% of the pricing workbook is already populated with non-fee bearing ODC plug numbers.
I've seen those.
Right? We've all been there. Okay, so now you put your fee on the labor. Your ODCs aren't getting any fee, but you still have $100 million running through your company, and now you've diluted your fee, your operating margin. You've diluted your operating margin on that program. You need to understand that, because when you add it all up, the 8% fee you put on 40% of the labor is going to get diluted by the 60% of the program that has no fee. So that's an example of mechanics of a program. That's tremendously important for everybody that's making decisions about the program to understand, and early. And that's also one of the reasons that this kind of work should be done as early as possible. And it gives senior leaders and executives, capture managers, and everybody else time to think about these things and make changes and make maneuvers to take that on board, deal with it, decide how to move forward, and execute. The last thing you want is a price to win being stuffed under your nose in a final pricing review. That's just mindless. It's really a bad thing to do, and it puts everybody in a terrible spot.
It does happen, though.
It does.
I've been a part of it. I'm sure you have too, where you're trying to get the information out early and it just doesn't flow.
We try to be done with our price to win analysis before the final RFP. When the final RFP comes out, we try to give our clients an update about 7 days after RFP drop. And then we react to all amendments throughout the proposal phase and update and deliver all the way into proposal submission.
That sounds like the right way to do it.
That's what I would want on the other side, right? That's how I wanted it, and that's what we try to do.
Having been a part of it from the other side and having been through the process, you understand why price to win is important. Why do clients hire you and come back to you again?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Well, they hire us in the first place because they have the problem we talked about. They're trying to figure out what their competition is going to do. They hire us again, normally because of our accuracy. Even if they don't win, we're usually very accurate, typically well below 5%. And that means we forecasted what their competition was going to price at, and how they're going to score, and then that's what actually happened.
So they can respect, even if they didn't come away with the win, they can respect that you gave them the right answer.
Absolutely, which is what our job is. I'm not going to be able, I talk about all the stakeholders in a big company or even a small company. They're all there. I can't make them do anything. They've got to make their own business, right? They've got to make their own business decisions, their own business cases, and they have reasons for their decisions. And that's why I call price to win the high wire act of capture. The high wire act of capture is price to win because there's always a day of reckoning in price to win. You said company X was going to bid $100 million or so. And then we saw the bids and company X was, they're at 97.8 or they're at 102.5. That's pretty close. If you can consistently do that, that's a really good forecast. You didn't say it was going to be sunny and 65 and then it ends up being, snows. You really missed it. So we really think of ourselves as forecasters. The other thing that really sets us apart, I think, two other really quick things is, one, we're engineering based. I'm an engineer, master's in engineering. My top people, I think there's 11 engineering degrees, and the top 4 or 5 people up through PhD, lots of experience in engineering. And that's great because we're solution architects and we can talk to the solution architects on the other side about what we think the competitors will actually do. And we can do that independently of our clients. They love that. They can see what we're talking about. They can see our solution architecture work, all of our build-ups of bombs, and hardware and software bombs, and all of that. And we show all our work. We don't say, "Oh, that's proprietary. We won't show you any of that stuff." We make it available to our clients. We go over it with them. We brief it. We show them all of it, how we calculated it. All of our workbooks are open. All the equations and formulas and wonderful things in Excel are things that everybody can look at and understand. And we'll spend as much time with a customer as as they want to make them understand what we did.
Okay, that was a great overview of Price to Win. There's far more details, many more things we could have talked about today, but we're keeping it at a high level. If listeners want to get a hold of you to learn more about Price to Win or maybe do business with the company, how would they do that?
Yeah, so we're eager to talk with anybody that's interested in talking with us about Price to Win. Very easy to get a hold of us. Go to our website at www.mcnultyinc.com. Email me at mmcnulty@mcnultyinc.com. That's mmcnulty@mcnultyinc.com. Or call me, 978-877-7987.
That was great. Thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing the information. And I hope that we can dive into these topics a little deeper in the future.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, that's it for this sort of extended length version of the podcast. If you want to have fun, or maybe it's not fun, but count how many times I agree with Michael as he's talking. I think I said right about 100 times during that one. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, we invite you to check out the Skyway community at skywaymember.com. The Skyway community is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a government contracting business. Whether you're just getting your first subcontract or you're already a successful government contractor, being a Skyway community member will help you get to the next level. With our extensive course library, weekly and monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, access, and tools, and a supportive and active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement, and advice, the Skyway community is the perfect place for anyone looking to grow as a successful government contractor. Check us out at skywaymember.com. We'll see you next week.